I want a divorce, Loretta. That's how it started. Not with tears, not with apologies, not even with anger. Just cold, flat words hanging in the air between us like a death sentence. My husband of 16 years, stood there in our kitchen in Prince George's County, Maryland, the one with them warm terracotta walls I'd spent 3 months picking out the perfect shade for, and he looked at me like I was a stranger asking for directions, like I was nothing. The roasted chicken I'd been making for him, his favorite, the one with the lemon and rosemary, the one that took 4 hours to prep right, was still in the oven, filling the whole house with that smell of home and love and everything I thought we had together. And he just ended it, right there, like he was canceling a magazine subscription he didn't read no more. I must have froze up, 'cause I remember my hands just locked on the counter, my whole body going stiff like somebody'd poured concrete in my veins. He kept talking, and Lord have mercy, what came out of his mouth next? "And let's be real clear about how this is gonna go," he said, his voice colder than them marble countertops I was gripping onto for dear life. "I'm keeping the house, the cars, the business, all of it. You ain't getting a dime, Loretta, not one single dime." He paused, and I swear I can still see the look on his face clear as day, looking me up and down like I was a piece of old furniture he was deciding whether to donate or just throw out on the curb. "But hey, you can keep Marcus, though. I don't want him. You can keep Marcus. You can keep our 16-year-old son, our beautiful, smart, sensitive boy, like he was a coffee table, like he was something left behind after you move out of a rental property. That's the moment, right there. That's when my heart didn't just break. It turned to ice, solid, cold ice. But you know what? I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, nodding, my face hot, my chest tight, and I thought to myself, okay, Reggie, okay. You want to play it like this? Let's play. 'Cause what he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I'd been ready for this day for 4 whole years. 4 years of watching him, documenting him, preparing for the moment he'd finally show his hand. And now here it was. The moment I'd been waiting for. But I'm getting way ahead of myself, and you need to understand how we got here. How a 17-year-old girl with big dreams ended up married to a man who'd throw her away like trash. And how that same girl, now 36 years old, was about to make him pay for every single lie. My name is Loretta, and I was born right here in Maryland, raised by my grandmother after my mama left when I was 9. Grandma Ruth, Lord rest her soul, she raised me with a firm hand and a soft heart. She taught me 2 things I never forgot. Never let a man make you feel small, and a woman's gotta have her own money. Not secret money, baby, just yours. I graduated high school a year early, not 'cause I was some genius, but 'cause I was practical and hungry to get out into the world, to start my own life. By 17, I had me a job as a file clerk at Covington & Reed Associates downtown, minimum wage and paper cuts for days, but it was mine. I learned fast. I watched the lawyers, how they moved, how they talked, how they built their cases brick by brick. By 18, I was a legal assistant. I had a good head for numbers, for details, for seeing patterns other folks missed. That's where I met Reggie. He was 24, a junior consultant with a smile that could charm the birds right out the trees. He had big dreams, y'all. Big, shiny dreams about building a real estate empire right here in Maryland. He talked about the future like it was already written, like success was just waiting around the corner for him to show up and claim it. And me? I was 17, green as spring grass, and I fell for every single word. "I'ma build something incredible, Loretta," he'd tell me, his eyes all lit up with ambition. "Something that'll last. Something real." And I believed him. I told him I'd help him file the paperwork, handle the legal stuff, keep everything organized. I thought we were building something together. I thought we were a team. We got married when I was 19. Quick ceremony at the courthouse. Nothing fancy. My grandma came. His mama Mildred showed up in a hat so big it blocked half the judge's view, and that was about it. Marcus came along a year later, 20 years old, a new mama, working part-time at the law firm and trying to keep up with a baby who never seemed to sleep. But I kept working. I kept saving. Every spare dollar I could scrape together went into my 401k. My grandmother's voice was always in my ear. Baby, you gotta have something that's yours. When Grandma Ruth passed, I was 22, she left me $380,000. $380,000 she'd saved her whole life working as a housekeeper, squirreling away every penny she could. She left it all to me. I cried for a week straight, not just 'cause I missed her so much my chest hurt, but 'cause I understood what she was trying to tell me. She was giving me freedom. She was giving me options. She was giving me a way out if I ever needed one. I put that money in a separate account. Didn't tell Reggie about it, not the full amount anyway. I just said Grandma left me a little something, and I never touched it. That money, plus my old IRA from the law firm that had grown to about $190,000, that was my nest egg, my safety net, my just-in-case fund. And Lord have mercy, I'm so glad I listened to her. When I was 23, Reggie's business, Maxwell Premier Properties, finally started taking off. He came home one night, all excited, talking fast like he always did when he had a new plan. "Loretta, baby, I need you," he said, taking my hands in his. "I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who knows the business inside and out. I need you to quit your job and come work with me full-time." I hesitated. I loved that job. I loved the lawyers I worked with, loved feeling competent and capable and seen. But Reggie, he had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world who could help him achieve his dreams, like you were special, essential. So I quit. I became his everything. I managed the books, handled the clients, decorated the model homes, planned the events, did the marketing. My title was wife, but my real job was running the entire back end of his empire, for free. For 11 years, I poured every single ounce of myself into that business. I worked 16-hour days. I missed Marcus's school plays, his basketball games, his science fairs. I was always too busy to be the mama I wanted to be, 'cause I was too busy making Reggie's dreams come true. And for 11 years, at every awards dinner, every industry gala, every fancy party where the champagne flowed and the men in suits congratulated each other on being so successful, Reggie thanked his team, he thanked his mentors, he thanked his own brilliant mind and strategic vision. He never thanked me. Not once. I was just the woman on his arm, the mother of his child, the invisible engine making his shiny car go. The cracks started small. Little hairline fractures you could ignore if you wanted to, and I wanted to. I needed to believe we were still building something together. The late nights at the office that turned into him coming home at 2, 3 in the morning, smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. The way he started criticizing everything. My cooking wasn't as good as it used to be, my clothes were too plain. I'd let myself go since having Marcus. I didn't understand modern business anymore. And then came the one that really stuck in my throat. I lacked ambition. Me, the woman who'd been running his entire operation for over a decade, the woman who'd given up her own career, her own dreams, to make his dreams possible. I lacked ambition. That's when I started paying closer attention. That's when I started noticing things I'd been too tired, too trusting, too stupid to see before. The business credit cards with charges for restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel rooms in cities where Reggie claimed he had meetings, but the meetings never seemed to produce actual clients. Wire transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Cash withdrawals, big ones, with no explanation. I started making copies, quietly, carefully. Every Wednesday night, when Reggie had his late business meeting, I'd go into his home office, the one he kept locked but whose key I'd long since found, and I'd photograph documents with my phone. Bank statements, credit card bills, loan applications. What I found, Lord have mercy, what I found made my blood run cold. The house we lived in, the beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Mitchellville with the wraparound porch and the garden I'd spent years cultivating, we didn't own it, not even close. Reggie had taken out a second mortgage, then a third. We owed $1.1 million on a house worth maybe $850,000. The business? Maxwell Premier Properties, the company I'd helped build from nothing? $480,000 in debt. Business loans he'd taken out without telling me. Lines of credit maxed out. Vendors we hadn't paid in months. The cars? His Mercedes, my SUV, the investment vehicle he bought to impress clients. All leased. $115,000 in obligations we couldn't afford. But that wasn't even the worst part. I found receipts for a gambling habit I didn't know existed. $75,000 gone, just gone, on some cryptocurrency scheme that crashed. Another $180,000. I found rent payments for an apartment in Silver Spring, $60,000 over 2 years, an apartment I'd never seen, never knew existed. And I found her name, Tiffany, 28 years old, worked in his office, been there 3 years. 3 years. He'd been lying to me for 3 years. I sat in that cold office, surrounded by a mountain of lies printed on bank statements. And I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I prayed. Not for him to change. Not for our marriage to be saved. I prayed for wisdom, for strength, for the courage to do what I knew had to be done. And I prayed for my son. My beautiful Marcus, who was 13 years old and still believed his daddy hung the moon. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront Reggie. I wasn't going to cry or beg or ask him to explain. I was going to wait. I was going to document everything. I was going to prepare. And when the time came, when he decided he was done with me, I was going to let him think he'd won. I became a ghost in my own home. I smiled at dinner. I asked about his day. I kept the house perfect, kept myself presentable, kept playing the role of the devoted wife while my heart turned colder and harder with every lie that came out of his mouth. And I kept saving. Quietly. My inheritance, my IRA, I didn't touch them, but I moved them. I talked to my Uncle James, a retired accountant I trusted with my life, and we created something called an irrevocable trust for Marcus. It's a legal term that basically means once you put money in it, nobody can take it out. Not me, not Reggie, not creditors or lawyers or judges. It was for Marcus's future, college, a house, a safety net, and it was untouchable. I transferred every single penny of my own money into that trust. $570,000. Money Reggie didn't even know existed. Money that was going to make sure my son had a future no matter what happened between his parents. For 4 years, I waited. 4 years of watching him buy $20,000 watches on the business account while telling Marcus we couldn't afford his school trip to Washington, D.C. 4 years of listening to him complain about money being tight while he took Tiffany to 5-star restaurants. 4 years of playing the fool while I documented every single transaction, every lie, every secret debt. And then came that Wednesday. The roasted chicken, the cold words, the moment he finally threw me away. I was ready. But you know what I wasn't ready for? I wasn't ready for how fast he moved after that. How vicious. The very next week, I was in the laundry room, still doing his laundry, can you believe that? When I heard the front door open. I figured it was a delivery, so I didn't rush. Then I heard his voice, all warm and welcoming. "Hey you, come on in, make yourself at home." I walked out with my laundry basket on my hip, and there she was. Tiffany, standing in my foyer like she'd been there 1,000 times before, laughing at something he'd said, her perfectly manicured hand on his arm. She looked exactly like I'd imagined. 28 years old, blonde highlights that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, yoga pants that hugged every curve, and this confidence, this knowing, like she'd already won. She walked right past me, didn't even look at me like I was part of the furniture, and headed straight for my kitchen. My kitchen. She opened my refrigerator, pulled out ingredients, and started making herself a smoothie in my blender. And then, Lord, I swear this happened. She tied my grandmother's apron around her waist. My Grandma Ruth's apron. The one with the faded yellow flowers. The one I'd worn 1,000 times while cooking Sunday dinners for this man who was now replacing me like I'd expired. I just stood there, holding that laundry basket, invisible in my own home. And Tiffany? She looked at me. Really looked at me for the first time, and she smiled. Not a mean smile, not exactly, just satisfied. Like she was saying, "This is mine now, all of it." And I thought to myself, "Child, you have no idea what you're getting into. You think you won a prize. You won a house built on quicksand." The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in humiliation. Tiffany was there all the time, morning, noon, night. They'd sit on my couch, the one I'd spent 6 months saving for, the one I'd picked out in that dusty rose color because Reggie said it made the room feel warm, watching my television, eating off my plates, laughing at jokes I wasn't part of. He'd put his arm around her, right there, in my living room. While I was in the kitchen pretending to be busy, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the dish towel. I'd go to bed in the guest room. I'd moved myself out of our bedroom without him even asking, just to spare myself the final indignity, and I could hear them, talking low, laughing, making plans for a future that didn't include me. But the worst part? The absolute worst part? Marcus saw all of it. My 16-year-old son, who still had homework and basketball practice and teenage problems, was watching his father parade his mistress around like she was already the new lady of the house. He'd come home from school, and there she'd be, curled up on the couch in her expensive athleisure, scrolling through her phone, acting like she belonged there. Marcus would look at me with these questions in his eyes, questions I couldn't answer because I didn't have the words yet. How do you explain to your son that his father had already left the marriage long before he asked for the divorce? How do you tell him that sometimes people you love disappoint you in ways you never saw coming? I couldn't, so I just hugged him tight and tried to pretend everything was going to be all right. Then Mildred showed up. Oh, Lord, Mildred, Reggie's mama. If there was ever a woman who believed the sun rose and set because her son allowed it, it was Mildred Maxwell. She'd never liked me much. I wasn't refined enough, didn't come from the right kind of family, didn't have the pedigree she'd wanted for her precious boy. But she'd tolerated me for 16 years because I was useful. I made Reggie's life easier. I gave her a grandson. But now that Reggie didn't want me anymore, now I was disposable. She showed up one Saturday morning, dressed to the nines in one of her St. John suits, pearls at her throat, that practiced expression of sympathy on her face that didn't reach her cold eyes. "Loretta, dear," she said, patting my hand with her bony fingers. The touch made my skin crawl. "I've come to help you pack. Help me pack." Like I was a child who couldn't manage my own belongings, like I needed supervision. And by help, I learned very quickly what she actually meant. She went through my life like she was sorting donations for Goodwill. My clothes? These are so worn, dear. You really should invest in quality pieces. My books? Oh, Reggie won't want these cluttering up his space. The family photos from our vacations, our anniversaries, Marcus's childhood? Reggie will want these, she'd say, putting most of them in a pile for him. She even hesitated over my Grandma Ruth's recipe box, the worn wooden box where my grandmother had kept her handwritten recipes, the ones she'd passed down to me before she died. Mildred picked it up, turned it over in her hands like she was appraising it, and for one terrifying second, I thought she was going to claim it for herself. But what really made my blood boil? The jewelry. Every piece Reggie had ever given me. The diamond studs for our 5th anniversary, the pearl necklace for Marcus's birth, the bracelet he'd surprised me with when the business first started making real money. Mildred took them all. "These are marital assets, dear," she explained, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "And Reggie is entitled to them. I'm sure you understand." I understood, all right. I understood that she was enjoying this, that she was relishing every moment of my humiliation. But here's what killed me. The bags. She was packing my life, the few things she deemed worthy for me to keep, into black garbage bags. Not boxes, not suitcases. Garbage bags. Like I was trash being taken out to the curb. I stood there watching this woman, This woman who'd been at my wedding, who'd held my hand when Marcus was born, who'd eaten at my table for 16 years. And I realized she'd never seen me as family. I'd always been temporary, replaceable. And the worst part? I let her do it. I stood there and watched her pack my life into garbage bags, and I didn't say a word, because I was still playing my part, still acting like the broken, defeated wife who was too tired to fight. But inside, I was counting down the days. You know what hurts worse than your husband betraying you? Your best friend doing it too. Brenda and I go back to elementary school. 20 years of friendship. 20 years of sharing secrets, crying on each other's shoulders, celebrating each other's wins. She was there when I met Reggie. She was my maid of honor. She was in the delivery room when Marcus was born, holding my other hand while I pushed. She was my sister. So when everything fell apart with Reggie, she was the first person I called. She came right over, bottle of wine in hand, arms wide open. "You deserve so much better," she whispered, rubbing my back while I cried into her shoulder. "He's making a huge mistake, Loretta, a huge one. You're going to get through this, and you're going to be stronger for it." She said all the right things. She was so supportive, always checking in, always asking how I was holding up, always wanting to know what my plans were, where I was looking for apartments, what my lawyer was saying. And I told her everything, because I trusted her, because she was my best friend, because in my darkest hour, I needed someone on my side. But then, little things started feeling off. It was subtle at first, just this weird feeling I couldn't quite name. Reggie seemed to know things he shouldn't know. He'd bring up my plans before I'd had a chance to mention them to him. He'd make comments about conversations I'd only had with Brenda. One night, I was on the phone with her, crying about having to find a place to live. "I found this little apartment complex in Bowie," I told her, my voice thick with tears. "The Willows. It's small, but it's clean and safe, and I can afford it. I'm going to go look at it tomorrow." It was the only place I'd looked at, the only one I'd even mentioned to anyone. The very next day, Marcus came home from a weekend visit with his father. He was quiet, wouldn't meet my eyes, had this heavy weight on his shoulders that no 16-year-old should have to carry. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked him, pulling him into a hug. He shrugged, but I could feel the tension in his body. "Dad says I shouldn't get too comfortable in Bowie. He said the Willows is too expensive for you, and we won't be there long before we have to move again." My whole body went cold. The Willows. He knew the name. I hadn't even been there yet, hadn't filled out an application, hadn't told Reggie anything about it. How did he know? I sent Marcus to his room, my mind racing, trying to piece together the puzzle. And then it hit me. Slowly at first, then all at once, like a dam breaking. All those phone calls with Brenda where I'd poured my heart out. All those conversations where I'd shared my fears, my plans, my strategies. All those moments I'd trusted her with my truth. She'd been telling him everything. I sat down on my couch, the one Reggie and Tiffany had claimed as their own, and I replayed every interaction in my head. The way Brenda always asked about Reggie first. "How's Reggie doing? How's he handling all this? Is he seeing anyone?" The way she'd light up whenever he walked into a room at parties, her laugh just a little too loud at his jokes that weren't even funny. The way she'd always found a way to mention him in conversation, even when we were talking about something completely unrelated. 20 years. She'd been carrying a torch for my husband for 20 years. And Reggie, that smooth-talking, manipulative man who collected admirers like some people collect stamps, he'd known exactly how to use it. He'd made her feel special, important, different from other women. He probably whispered just enough empty promises in her ear to keep her loyal, to keep her feeding him information, to keep her hoping that maybe, just maybe, when he was done with me, he'd choose her. My best friend, my sister. She'd sold me out for a wink and a smile from a man who used everyone around him. I didn't confront her. Not then. I just stopped calling, stopped answering her texts. Let her fade away like the friendship we'd had was just a dream I'd woken up from. And when she finally realized I'd figured it out, when she called crying and apologizing, saying she didn't know it was like this, saying she thought she and Reggie had something real. I listened to her sob for about 30 seconds. Then I said, "Some bridges burn for a reason, Brenda," and I hung up. 20 years of friendship, gone. And you know what? I didn't shed a single tear over it. I couldn't afford to. I had bigger battles to fight. Marcus was the one who almost broke me, though. Not Reggie, not Mildred, not Brenda. My son. He was 16, right at that age where he was trying to figure out who he was, who he wanted to be. And his father was working on him, dripping poison in his ear every single chance he got. "Your mom's making this difficult," Reggie would tell him during their weekend visits. "I'm trying to be fair, trying to do right by everybody, but she won't cooperate. She's being stubborn, selfish." Marcus would come home quiet, withdrawn, looking at me with these questions in his eyes. Questions like, "Are you really the problem? Is Dad telling the truth? Why can't you just let him have what he wants so we can all move on?" I could lose the house. I could lose the business I'd helped build. I could lose every material thing Reggie wanted to take from me. But watching my own son look at me like I was the villain in this story, like I was the one tearing our family apart, that was the knife. That was the wound that actually bled. One night, about 2 weeks before the final court date, Marcus came into the kitchen where I was making dinner in our new apartment in Bowie. I'd moved us there a month earlier into this tiny 2-bedroom place that was about 1/3 the size of what we were used to. He sat down at the little kitchen table, not even big enough for 4 people, and just watched me cook for a minute. "Mom," he finally said, his voice careful, "why didn't you just give Dad what he wanted? Why make it so hard?" I stopped stirring the pot on the stove. My hands were shaking, and I put the spoon down carefully before I turned to look at my son. "What do you think your dad wants, Marcus?" I asked him gently. He shrugged. The house, the business, his life back. "And where do you think that leaves us?" I asked. Another shrug. But his eyes were starting to understand something. "Your father asked for everything except you," I said, keeping my voice steady, even though my heart was breaking. "He specifically said I could keep you, like you were a piece of furniture he didn't need anymore." Marcus looked down at his hands. "I know you love your dad," I continued, "and you should. He's your father. But you need to understand something, baby. Everything I'm doing, every single thing, it's to make sure you're protected. No matter what happens between your father and me, no matter what lies he tells or what he tries to take, you're gonna be okay." "How do you know?" he asked, his voice small. I wanted to tell him everything right then, about the trust, about the documents, about the trap I'd spent 4 years setting. But I couldn't. Not yet. So instead I said, "Because I'm your mama. And protecting you is the only job I've ever had that actually matters." He nodded slowly. Then he got up and hugged me, quick and awkward the way teenage boys do. But it was enough. It had to be enough. The first mediation session was scheduled for a Monday morning in March. I remember the date because it was Marcus's 16th birthday, and instead of celebrating with him, I was sitting in a sterile conference room downtown, about to play the biggest role of my life. I dressed carefully that morning. A simple black dress, nothing fancy, no jewelry except my wedding ring, which I'd kept on specifically for this. I pulled my hair back into a low bun. No makeup except a little concealer to hide the dark circles under my eyes, though honestly, I didn't need much concealer. I hadn't been sleeping well for weeks. I wanted to look tired, defeated, like a woman who'd given up. Reggie was already there when I arrived, looking impatient in a crisp navy suit. His lawyer, Arthur, was a shark in his 60s with silver hair and cold eyes, the kind of lawyer rich men hire when they want to destroy their wives in divorce court. On my side, just me and Imani. Imani was a black woman in her early 40s, smart as a whip, with natural hair she wore in a crown of curls and eyes that missed nothing. She was the best divorce lawyer in Prince George's County, and she'd cost me a pretty penny, but she was worth every cent. We'd rehearsed this. God, we'd rehearsed this moment for weeks. "My client has authorized me to make an offer," Imani said, her voice firm and professional. She sighed, just a little puff of air that said, "This is the best I can do with what I'm working with." Mrs. Maxwell is prepared to relinquish all claims on the marital property, the residence, the business, all vehicles, in exchange for a one-time cash settlement of $75,000. I kept my eyes down, my hands folded in my lap, trembling, just slightly, just enough. Across the table, I saw Reggie's whole body relax. I saw the smirk spread across his face. I saw him glance at Arthur with this look of pure, arrogant triumph. $75,000 for a house, a business, cars, everything we'd supposedly built together. To him, it was a joke, the deal of the century. He was getting an empire for pocket change. And shared custody of their son, Marcus, Imani added. Of course, Reggie said, waving a dismissive hand. He could barely contain his excitement. Of course, that's very reasonable. Arthur looked less sure. He was studying the papers Imani had slid across the table, his experienced eyes scanning the fine print. "Mr. Maxwell," he said carefully, "I'd like to recommend we conduct an independent—" "No," Reggie cut him off. "No audits, no delays, let's just get this done." Arthur frowned. "Sir, I really think—" "I said no, Arthur." Reggie's voice was sharp. "I know my own business. I know what I'm worth. Let's just sign the papers and move on." I watched Arthur's jaw tighten. He pulled out a single sheet of paper from his briefcase, placed it in front of Reggie. "Then I need you to sign this waiver, stating that you've been advised to conduct a financial review and you're choosing to proceed without one against my counsel." Reggie barely glanced at it before scrawling his signature at the bottom. The pen moved so fast, so carelessly, like he couldn't wait to get this over with. That signature was going to cost him everything. But he didn't know that yet. The mediation wrapped up quickly after that. We scheduled the final court date, Friday, May 22nd, and walked out into the bright March sunshine. In the parking lot, Imani turned to me, a small smile playing at her lips. "He has no idea," she said quietly. "No," I agreed, feeling that cold, hard certainty settling deeper in my chest. "He really doesn't." The weeks between mediation and the final court date felt like living in two different worlds at the same time. In one world, I was moving into my small apartment in Bowie, unpacking boxes, hanging curtains, trying to make a home for Marcus and me in 900 square feet. I was job hunting, updating my resume, reaching out to old contacts from my days at the law firm. I was playing the part of the defeated ex-wife, starting over from scratch. But in the other world, the real world, I was preparing for war. I met with Imani twice a week. We went through everything, every document, every debt, every liability. We built our case not to win in court, but to let Reggie win himself right into bankruptcy. The beauty of this, Imani explained during one of our sessions, is that he's volunteering to take it all. The house with its 3 mortgages, the business with its $480,000 in debt, the leased vehicles, everything. And he's waiving his right to an independent audit, which means he can't claim later that he didn't know what he was signing up for. "What if Arthur convinces him to change his mind?" I asked. Imani shook her head. "Arthur's already tried. Multiple times according to my sources. But Reggie's too arrogant to listen. He thinks he knows better than his own lawyer. And that," she smiled, "that's what's going to bury him." In the meantime, life went on. Marcus started his junior year of high school. He was adjusting to the apartment, making new friends, getting involved in basketball at his new school. He still spent weekends with Reggie, but I could see the distance growing between them. The way Marcus would come home quiet, thoughtful, like he was starting to see through the polished surface to the rot underneath. One Sunday evening, he came home earlier than expected. I was in the kitchen making dinner, spaghetti, nothing fancy, when I heard his key in the lock. "You're home early," I said, glancing at the clock. It was barely 6. Marcus dropped his backpack by the door and came into the kitchen. "Dad had to take Tiffany to some charity event. Told me to take an Uber home." There was something in his voice. Something hard. "You okay, baby?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, She's pregnant. The wooden spoon I was holding clattered into the sink. What? Tiffany. She's pregnant. Dad announced it at dinner like it was this great news, like it was something to celebrate. Marcus's voice was flat. He's having a baby with her, Mom. They're going to have a kid together, and he just sent me home in an Uber so he could go to her fancy event. I crossed the small kitchen and pulled my son into a hug. He was taller than me now, had been for a year, but in that moment he felt small, vulnerable. I'm sorry, I whispered into his shoulder. I'm so sorry, baby. He really doesn't want me, does he? Marcus asked, his voice cracking. He wasn't lying when he said you could keep me. I'm in the way of his new life. And that right there, that's the moment I stopped feeling any guilt about what was coming. That's the moment I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that Reggie deserved every single thing that was about to happen to him. Listen to me, I said, pulling back to look Marcus in the eye. Your father is about to learn a very hard lesson about consequences. And when it all comes crashing down, and it will, I need you to remember that you are loved, you are wanted, you are precious to me, and no matter what happens, we're going to be okay. Marcus nodded slowly. He didn't ask what I meant. He was 16, not stupid. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what. May 22nd arrived with sunshine and humidity, that thick Maryland spring weather that makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet blanket. I woke up at 5 a.m, too anxious to sleep. I made coffee. I sat on my small balcony watching the sun rise over Bowie, thinking about Grandma Ruth. She'd always said, patience is a virtue, but so is knowing when to strike. Today was the day to strike. I chose my outfit with care. The same simple navy dress I'd worn to mediation. The same low bun. The same tired expression. I practiced in the mirror, letting my shoulders slump, my eyes go dull and defeated. I looked like a woman who'd lost everything. Perfect. I arrived at the courthouse 15 minutes early. The building was imposing, all marble and authority, and I felt my heart start to race as I walked through the metal detectors. This was it. 4 years of planning, of waiting, of playing the long game. Reggie was already there in the hallway outside the courtroom, holding court with Arthur. He was wearing his best suit, the charcoal Armani he saved for special occasions, and that $20,000 watch glinted under the fluorescent lights. He looked confident, victorious. He looked like a man about to win the lottery. I caught a glimpse of Tiffany down the hall, her hand resting protectively over her still flat stomach. She wasn't allowed in the courtroom, but she was there to support him, to celebrate with him afterward. And there, sitting on a bench near the courtroom door, was Mildred. She'd dressed up for the occasion in a cream-colored Chanel suit, probably already planning the celebratory lunch at some expensive restaurant where they'd toast to Reggie's victory. She saw me and gave me that same pitying smile. Poor Loretta, so defeated, so broken. I smiled back, soft, sad. Inside, I was counting down the seconds. Imani met me at the courtroom door. She was wearing a sharp black suit, her natural hair pulled back, looking every inch the competent professional. She squeezed my hand once, quick and firm. "Remember," she murmured, defeated, resigned. "You just want this over with." I nodded. We entered the courtroom. Judge Holden was already seated, reviewing the case file. She was a woman in her early 60s with silver hair pulled back so tight it looked painful, and eyes that had seen every dirty trick in the family law playbook. They said she'd been on the bench in Prince George's County for 30 years. She'd seen it all. Nothing surprised her anymore. The bailiff called us to order. Maxwell versus Maxwell. Final dissolution hearing. Judge Holden looked up from the file, her gaze sweeping over both sides of the courtroom. "I understand the parties have reached an agreement." Arthur stood first. His voice was smooth, practiced. "Yes, Your Honor. My client, Mr. Reggie Maxwell, is assuming all marital assets. This includes the family residence located at 1247 Oak Haven Court in Mitchellville, the business entity known as Maxwell Premier Properties, and all associated vehicles. He paused. In exchange, Mrs. Maxwell will receive a one-time cash settlement of $75,000. Imani rose beside me. That is correct, Your Honor. My client agrees to relinquish all claims to the aforementioned assets and accepts the proposed settlement terms. Judge Holden's eyes moved to me. They were sharp, assessing, looking for any sign that I was being coerced or manipulated. Mrs. Maxwell, she said, her voice stern, I need to confirm that you understand what you're agreeing to today. You are giving up your claim to substantial property, the family home, a business you helped build, multiple vehicles. Are you certain this is what you want? This was it, the performance. I took a shaky breath. I looked down at my hands, twisted them in my lap like I was trying to hold myself together. Yes, Your Honor, I whispered, my voice just slightly unsteady. I understand. And you are entering this agreement voluntarily? No one is pressuring you or forcing you into this decision? I looked up at her, and I let a single tear, just one, I'd practiced this, slide down my cheek. No, Your Honor. I just want this to be over. I want my husband to have everything he asked for. I just want peace. The judge studied me for a long moment. I could see the conflict in her eyes. This looked bad. This looked like a terrible deal for me. But I was an adult woman, represented by counsel, saying all the right words with a lawyer present who wasn't objecting. Her hands were tied. Very well, she said finally, though I caught a hint of regret in her voice. Let's proceed with the final signatures. The clerk brought the documents over. A thick stack of papers, dense with legal language. The property settlement agreement, the custody arrangement, the financial disclosures. And buried on page 47, in language so dry and technical you'd need a legal dictionary to understand it, the liability disclosure statement. The document that listed every single debt, every mortgage, every loan, every financial obligation associated with the assets Reggie was claiming. The trap. Reggie practically lunged for the pen. He was signing page after page, barely even glancing at the content. He was in a hurry. He wanted this done so he could get back to his new life, his new girlfriend, his new baby on the way. Then it was my turn. I took the pen from the clerk's hand, and I signed slowly, deliberately, each stroke of my name feeling like victory. Across the courtroom, I saw Reggie give his mother a triumphant wink. She beamed back at him, practically glowing with pride. He'd won. He'd gotten everything. The house, the business, the cars. All for a measly $75,000. Or so he thought. Imani gave a small nod to Arthur. I watched his face as he picked up his copy of the final agreement, flipping through it one last time out of habit. Page 1, the main agreement, signed. Page 15, the asset schedule, signed. Page 28, the custody arrangement, signed. Page 47, the liability disclosure statement. I watched Arthur's face change as he read that page. It was like watching a man realize he's been standing on thin ice and it's about to crack beneath him. His eyebrows furrowed. He flipped back a page, then forward again, like maybe he'd misread something. He hadn't. He leaned toward Reggie, trying to be discreet, his voice a harsh whisper. Sir, we need to talk. Right now. Reggie waved him off, annoyed. He was still basking in his victory, watching the judge prepare to make her final pronouncement. Not now, Arthur. This is almost over. Sir, Arthur's voice was more urgent now. The liability disclosure. You're assuming all the debt. Reggie finally turned to look at him, irritation clear on his face. What are you talking about? The mortgages, Arthur whispered, jabbing his finger at the page. The business loans, the vehicle leases. It's all here. You're personally assuming liability for all of it. I watched Reggie's face as understanding slowly dawned. He snatched the document from Arthur's hands, his eyes scanning the numbers. The primary residence, $1.1 million owed. On a property currently valued at approximately $850,000. Maxwell Premier Properties, $480,000 in combined business debts, lines of credit, and unpaid vendor invoices. Vehicle leases, $115,000 in remaining obligations. Additional documented liabilities, the ones I'd so carefully photographed and filed away, another $200,000 in gambling losses, cryptocurrency investments, and rent for a secret apartment. Total debt, $2.1 million. Total actual value of everything he'd just claimed, maybe $1.6 million on a really good day. Net worth, negative $500,000. He hadn't won the lottery, he'd won the bill for the lottery tickets. Reggie shot up from his chair so fast it scraped loudly against the courtroom floor. "This isn't right," he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "She manipulated this. She's dumping everything on me." Judge Holden's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. "Mr. Maxwell, sit down. These numbers are fake." His voice was rising, panic bleeding through. "She manipulated the documents. This is fraud." "Mr. Maxwell." The judge's tone left absolutely no room for argument. "Sit down now." He sank back into his chair, but his whole body was trembling. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by the wild-eyed look of a trapped animal who just realized the cage door had closed behind him. Judge Holden picked up the liability disclosure statement, studying it carefully. Then she fixed Reggie with a stare that could have frozen lava. "Mr. Maxwell, I am looking at the liability disclosure statement attached to this agreement. These are debts associated with the assets you are claiming. Assets held in your name, your business registered under your name, your primary residence with your name on the mortgage documents." She paused. "Are you telling this court that you do not know the financial status of your own holdings?" Silence. Watching Reggie try to formulate a response was like watching someone try to explain why the sky is green and grass is blue. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Arthur cleared his throat. He looked miserable, and I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "I should note for the record that I strongly, very strongly, advised my client to conduct an independent financial review prior to this hearing." He held up a single sheet of paper. "I have documentation." He signed a waiver declining this advice. The judge took the waiver, reading it with the kind of thorough attention that made Reggie squirm in his seat. It was all there in black and white. Arthur's recommendation for an audit, Reggie's signature declining. The date? 3 weeks ago. "So, Mr. Maxwell," Judge Holden said, her voice cold enough to frost the windows, "you were advised by your own legal counsel to verify these financial figures. You chose not to. You signed a legal waiver acknowledging that choice. Is that correct?" Reggie's voice came out as a choked whisper. "Yes. Then you assumed this risk voluntarily." She picked up her gavel. "The agreement stands as written. This marriage is hereby dissolved. Mrs. Maxwell, you will receive your settlement of $75,000 within 30 days. Mr. Maxwell," she paused, and I swear there was the tiniest hint of something that might have been satisfaction in her eyes. "You have the assets as agreed, along with all associated liabilities. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down. Bang! The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. It was done. I stood up slowly, smoothed down my navy dress, and picked up my purse. I didn't look at Reggie. Not yet. I walked toward the courtroom doors with my head high, my steps measured and calm. But just before I reached the exit, I let myself turn back. Just for a second. Reggie was still sitting at the table, the documents spread out in front of him, his hands in his hair. Arthur was talking urgently, probably already calculating how to minimize the damage, but Reggie wasn't listening. He was just staring at the numbers, his face pale, his mouth moving but no sound coming out. Mildred was standing now, her face a mask of shock and fury, trying to get her son's attention, but he couldn't hear her either. And through the courtroom doors, I saw Tiffany in the hallway. She'd heard enough. I watched her face as the reality sank in. This wasn't a successful businessman she'd tied herself to. This was a bankrupt, desperate man drowning in debt. She looked at Reggie one last time through the glass doors. Then she turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor, her hand dropping from her stomach, moving faster with each step. She was gone before I even reached the elevator. I stepped outside into the bright May sunshine. The air was thick and humid, but it felt like freedom. The sky was brilliant blue. Somewhere behind me, Reggie was just beginning to understand what he'd done to himself. But I was already gone. What happened next happened fast. You'd think watching everything crumble would take time, would unfold slowly like a careful demolition. But when debt comes calling, when the walls finally fall, it's an avalanche. Within 2 weeks, Tiffany was gone, vanished, packed her designer suitcases in the middle of the night and left a note on the kitchen counter. The same counter she'd claimed as her own in the sterile white kitchen she'd painted over my warm terracotta walls. The note said, "This isn't what I signed up for." I heard about it through my old contacts at the law firm. One of the paralegals who used to work with me called, couldn't help herself from sharing the gossip. Apparently, Tiffany had expected a life of luxury, not a life of collection agency phone calls and bankruptcy lawyers. The baby she was pregnant with? Turns out that was convenient timing on her part. She'd hoped it would lock Reggie in, make him marry her, secure her future. Instead, she'd looked at the mountain of debt and decided a different future looked better. I didn't feel good about it, but I didn't feel bad either. Within a month, he tried to sell the house, listed it with the same real estate company he'd built his empire on. But when you owe $1.1 million on a house that's worth $850,000, if you're lucky and find the right buyer, you don't have buyers. You have banks. Banks calling about missed payments, their voices polite but firm. Realtors suggesting a short sale, their tones full of carefully practiced sympathy. The house in Mitchellville, the one I'd turned into a home, the one with the garden I'd cultivated for 16 years. It became an anchor dragging him straight to the bottom. 2 months in, the business started collapsing. Maxwell Premier Properties, the name he was so proud of, the empire we'd supposedly built together, was getting sued left and right. Vendors he hadn't paid, contractors he'd stiffed, clients who'd put down deposits on properties that didn't exist. The business line of credit was frozen. His accounts were being audited. The company I'd spent 11 years supporting from the shadows, managing the books for, decorating model homes for, sacrificing my own dreams for, it crumbled into dust faster than I could have imagined. And all I had to do was watch. 3 months after the divorce, I got a phone call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Loretta?" The voice was shaking, cracking with tears. "It's Brenda." I should have hung up right then, but curiosity, or maybe something meaner, made me stay on the line. "I had no idea," she sobbed into the phone. "I swear, Loretta, I had no idea things were this bad. I thought he was successful. I thought we had something real, you know? He promised me that once everything settled down, once you were out of the picture, we could—" I cut her off. "Let me guess. He's not returning your calls anymore." Silence. Then a choked, "No." I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. "Some bridges burn for a reason, Brenda. Please, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean 20 years of friendship," I said quietly. "Sold out for a handful of empty promises from a man who uses everyone around him. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it." I hung up before she could respond. And you know what? I slept just fine that night. But the final act came about a month after that. It was late, after 10. Marcus was in his room doing homework, and I was in the kitchen cleaning up from dinner. Then there was a knock on my door. 3 sharp raps that made my heart jump into my throat. I looked through the peephole, and time seemed to stop. Reggie. I almost didn't recognize him. He'd lost weight, not the healthy kind, but the kind you lose from stress and missed meals and sleepless nights. There were dark circles under his eyes so deep they looked like bruises. His expensive suit was wrinkled, like he'd been sleeping in it. The $20,000 watch was gone, probably sold to pay one of the many, many bills that were drowning him. He looked like a man who'd been through a war and lost everything. For a split second, just a second, I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered the roasted chicken, the cold words, "You can keep Marcus." The way he'd paraded Tiffany through my home while I packed my life into garbage bags. The pity evaporated. I opened the door but didn't invite him in, just stood there in the doorway, waiting. "Loretta," he said, his voice hoarse. Can we talk? Please?" "What do you want, Reggie?" He ran a hand through his hair. It needed cutting, I noticed. "I didn't know," he said, and there were actual tears in his eyes. "I swear to God, I didn't know it was this bad. The debts, the mortgages. I thought I had it under control. I made mistakes. I know that now. But I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I leaned against the door frame, arms crossed, just looking at him. "Arthur says I might have to declare bankruptcy," he continued, the words spilling out faster now. "The house is in foreclosure. The business is being liquidated. My mother won't even take my calls anymore. Tiffany's gone. Brenda's gone. I've got nobody, Loretta. Nobody." He looked up at me with those red-rimmed eyes. Maybe we could figure something out. You know the business better than anyone. You always did. Maybe you could help me restructure, get back on my feet. I don't know, we could try again. For Marcus's sake, for... Stop. The word came out harder than I meant it to, but it shut him up. "You want to know something, Reggie?" I said, my voice quiet but steady. 4 years ago, I found your bank statements. All of them. The gambling debts, the cryptocurrency losses, the secret apartment in Silver Spring you were renting for your girlfriend. I found everything. His face turned ashen. I spent 4 years documenting every lie, every debt, every secret. I put every penny I had, money you didn't even know existed, money my grandmother left me, into a trust for Marcus. A trust you can't touch, can't claim, can't use to pay off your debts. Loretta. I waited, I continued, and I could hear my own voice getting stronger, harder. I waited for you to make the first move. I waited for you to stand in my kitchen and tell me you wanted a divorce. I waited for you to get greedy, to grab for everything, to refuse the audit your own lawyer begged you to get. And you did exactly what I knew you'd do. You played yourself, Reggie. I just let you. He was shaking his head, backing away from my door like I was something dangerous. You planned this. You trapped me. No. I shook my head. You trapped yourself. I just made sure Marcus and I weren't standing in the rubble when it all came down. Please, he whispered, and now he was crying openly. Please, Loretta. I've got nothing left. I need help. You asked for everything except Marcus, I said, cutting him off. You told me I could keep him, like our son was a piece of furniture you didn't want to bother moving. So that's what I did, Reggie. I kept him safe. I kept him protected. I kept him away from your mess. I took a step back, my hand on the door. Goodbye, Reggie. I closed the door in his face. Stood there for a moment, my forehead pressed against the cool wood, just breathing. I could hear him on the other side, crying, maybe begging, but I couldn't make out the words. After a minute, his footsteps moved away down the hall. The elevator dinged. Then silence. When I finally turned around, Marcus was standing in the doorway to his room, arms crossed, looking at me with eyes that seemed older than 17. You waited 4 years, Mom? He asked quietly. I nodded. I wanted to make sure you were protected. Whatever happened between your father and me, I needed to know you'd be okay. He walked across the small living room and hugged me. Really hugged me. The kind of tight, fierce hug that says everything words can't. I'm proud of you, he whispered into my hair. And that right there, that was worth more than any house, any business, any amount of money Reggie thought he was taking from me. 6 months later, I started my own business. Loretta's Designs. Small at first, just me, working out of my apartment, taking on clients through word of mouth and a simple website Marcus helped me build. My first real client was a woman named Sandra, 52 years old, just ending a 28-year marriage. She was standing in her empty new apartment when I arrived for our consultation, looking lost and small and broken. "I don't even know where to start," she told me, her voice shaking. How do you start over?" I looked around at the blank white walls, the empty rooms that held no memories yet, and I smiled. "One room at a time," I told her. "We'll paint your kitchen first, something warm, something that feels like home." We chose a terracotta color, warm and earthy and full of hope. When it was done, Sandra stood in her new kitchen and cried. "Happy tears," she said, wiping her eyes. "The color of new beginnings." I understood exactly what she meant. The business grew. Word spread. Women who were starting over, who needed someone who understood what it meant to rebuild from scratch. I wasn't just designing spaces. I was designing futures. And me? I enrolled in interior design courses at Prince George's Community College. The dream I'd put on hold when I was 23, when Reggie asked me to quit my job and help him build his empire. It was still there, waiting for me. I wasn't building an empire. I was building a life, a real one, on my own terms. Marcus is thriving. He's got a 3.8 GPA, he made varsity basketball, and he got early acceptance to 3 different colleges, all paid for by the trust I set up, the one Reggie never knew existed. His father? Last I heard, Reggie's living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Silver Spring, working as a sales associate at a real estate firm, not owning it, just working for someone else. The bankruptcy went through. The house was foreclosed. The business dissolved. Mildred still won't speak to him, blaming him for embarrassing the family. Brenda moved to North Carolina. I heard she got married. I hope she's happy. I really do. As for me, I'm sitting here on my balcony in Bowie, watching the sun set over the city. Marcus is inside, probably on a video call with his girlfriend. The air is warm, and for the first time in almost 2 decades, it feels like it's mine. I have my son. I have my work. I have my peace. I gave Reggie exactly what he asked for, everything, and in doing so, I got everything I ever truly needed. But I gotta ask you something, and I really want you to think about this. Was I wrong? Was I wrong to wait 4 years in silence, documenting his lies? Was I wrong to set a trap and let him walk into it? Some folks might say I should have fought him honestly, out in the open, cards on the table. Others might say he got exactly what he deserved, that a man who'd throw away his wife and son like garbage had it coming. It was a long game of chess, and he thought he was playing checkers. But when your whole life is on the line, when your child's future is at stake, how far is too far to protect what matters? Was it justice, or was it just cold, calculated revenge? I don't know if I have the answer myself. Some days I think I did what I had to do. Other days I wonder if I let the hurt turn me into something harder than I wanted to be. What do you think? Was I justified, or did I go too far? Let me know in the comments, 'cause I'ma read every single one. Thank you for listening to my story, from the bottom of my heart. God bless y'all, and I'll see you in the next one.